Hey, welcome back. So as I've already mentioned, this section marks a significant turning point in the course. We're now going to focus our attention on a bunch of data structures. So classic data structures like singly linked lists, doubly linked lists, stacks, queues. We're also going to implement more complicated ones like trees and binary search trees, graphs. But along the way, not only are we going to learn about these data structures and talk about why they matter and how they're useful, we're also going to implement them. JavaScript doesn't come with any of these pre-built. And so the point is that we're going to go through and write our own. But in order to do that, we need to take advantage of the ES2015 class syntax in JavaScript. So depending on how familiar you are with JavaScript and with object-oriented programming, you may know that JavaScript doesn't really support OOP or object-oriented programming. However, with ES2015, a new class keyword was introduced. We're going to take advantage of that throughout this course because it makes it really easy and simple for us to define our data structures. So if you're already familiar with it, if you feel good about using the class keyword, writing constructors, instantiating new instances using your class in JavaScript, then you could skip this section. But if you need some review over it, or if you've never learned it before, I think that this will help you out. Also, if you've never worked with any sort of object-oriented language before, or you've never defined any sort of patterns, whether it's in JavaScript or in Python or Ruby or any other language, then this is going to be kind of a lot to take in right away. But I recommend that you watch this video, you try some of the examples, and then you start out with a singly linked list, which is up next, and see how that goes. But take it slow if you've never written a class before. So first, our objectives. We're going to start by talking about what a class is. We're going to understand how JavaScript implements the idea of classes, which I bolded because it's not quite true object-oriented programming. We'll define terms like abstraction, encapsulation, and polymorphism, and then we'll use ES2015 classes to implement data structures. Okay, so first up, what the heck is a class? So in general, a class is like a blueprint for creating objects with predefined properties and methods. So we'll learn how to make a singly linked list or a doubly linked list. We define a pattern for a doubly linked list, but then we can actually instantiate many objects, many individual linked lists using that blueprint, using our class. It's sort of like arrays in JavaScript, although it's not quite the same. We have a pattern for an array, and arrays come with a bunch of methods and things that they can do, but we have to first instantiate a new array, and then we can get access to all of those. So there's an array, it's not technically a class, but you can think of it as sort of a blueprint, and then we can instantiate objects based off of that blueprint. So as I kind of hinted at, JavaScript doesn't really have classes. If you go to the documentation on MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, you can see up top on this is their classes main page. JavaScript classes introduced in ES2015 are primarily syntactical sugar over JavaScript's existing prototype-based inheritance. The class syntax does not introduce a new object-oriented inheritance model to JavaScript. So what this is saying is basically JavaScript has never really been truly object-oriented. It takes advantage of something called prototype-based inheritance or prototypal. And all that happened with ES2015 is that this class syntax was introduced, but it's not changing how things work behind the scenes. It's just an easier way to work and to define class-like structures. So if you are not familiar with either of those, with object-oriented programming or prototype-based inheritance, then that probably made zero sense. But all that we'll say is that it does help to know that technically this is not true object-oriented programming, but that's not going to hinder us in any way. We just have to, it's good to know that. Let's just leave it at that. So next, why do we need to learn this? Well, as I've already mentioned, we're going to implement tons of data structures as classes. So anytime we're going to learn how to build a tree or a graph or a singly linked list. We're going to define a class, define a pattern in JavaScript that we can then instantiate individual lists from. For example, here's a little spoiler. Here's two classes we defined for our singly linked list. So you can see we have the class keyword, constructor. We'll go into all this detail, but here is the class for the singly linked list. It's kind of long. There's a lot of methods we add in there. This is a blueprint though. This doesn't actually represent any data. There's no instance of a list. We still have to instantiate one. Here's another really short class called a node, and the singly linked list class utilizes the node class inside of it. So that's all I'll say about it for now, but this is just a single example of many that we're going to see and implement on our own. So I think that I'll leave off here. Just know that classes are what we're going to use throughout the rest of the course. Coming up next, a bunch of data structures. In the next video, though, we're going to introduce the syntax for classes. So if you know it, you could skip it, get some review. But if you don't know it, I highly recommend that you just sit through the next couple videos. I know it's not on data structures just yet, but it's really important because we're going to use this. Okay, I'll shut up.